Border agents in Arizona this week finding more than 100,000 fentanyl pills, 14 pounds of fentanyl powder. The pills hidden in an ice chest, a large one. This comes just days after agents in Arizona also found 47,000 rainbow fentanyl pills targeting children and 186,000 traditional blue fentanyl pills, all smuggled in the hidden compartment of an automobile. Joining me now, Kansas Senator Roger Marshall. He's a member of the Energy, Small Business, and Agriculture Committees. Senator, you're planning to announce a bill this week holding social media companies accountable for illicit drug activity on their platforms. Tell me more about this. Aren't they already held accountable for such activity?
Well, that's a good question, Dig, and we want to elevate social media's accountability just like we hold them accountable for child pornography. We're naming this the Cooper Davis Act, and for your listeners, Cooper Davis was a beautiful young 16-year-old junior in high school who ordered 2 Percocet tablets about a year ago. He took one half of those tablets, one half of one tablet, and died from it. This is poisoning. It was done through Snapchat. We need to stop that type of behavior. We need to hold social media companies accountable. And like you're pointing out, thousands of these pills are being found every day. 2 tons of it was stopped at the border in July alone. This is the #1 killer. Fentanyl is the #1 killer of young adults. We lost more people last year than all of the Vietnam War. That's what this epidemic looks like, and unfortunately our president, this White House, are turning their back on a horrible situation. They could slow this down at the border.
Todd Pyro, I've said that they should start, the administration officials need to start going to some funerals. If they're not going to stop the drugs coming across the border, then the least they could do is pay their respects to the families who've lost these young people.
No, they're not doing anything, and clearly they are not going to do anything going forward. So along those lines, Senator, if and when Republicans reclaim the Senate majority, what will Republican senators do to right this wrong? Because Democrats are doing nothing, and the problem is getting worse and worse and worse, so much so that, like, I look at the floors in my house to make sure my toddler hasn't brought something in from daycare that she can put in her mouth. You know, typically it's like a rogue, I don't know, goldfish cracker. Now it could be a rainbow pill that could kill her. We can't live like that, Senator.
Right. So I think that we will make this a priority. This president did even mention fentanyl poisoning in his speech in Philadelphia recently. So we're going to hold this president's feet to the fire. We'll do what we can. Look, we're not going to have 60 votes to get the legislation passed that we need on the Senate side to secure the border. For $25 billion, we can secure this border, but instead, this president wants to spend another $49 billion on Ukraine and COVID relief right now. So we'll try to reset the priorities and slow down the spending at the White House, and then try to direct it where it needs to go.
I want to raise this issue with you, Senator. The Wall Street Journal editorial board slamming California Governor Gavin Newsom's energy policies as the state faces blackouts. The editorial board writing this with this warning: the government force-fed green energy is endangering grid reliability. But Democrats and the media can't break out of their climate change conformity to think clearly or think at all. And the bigger picture for the United States is California, run by left-wing individuals like Gavin Newsom, they lead the country. The emission standards are based on what California says. California can't keep the lights on. That LA County, as one example, is getting almost a third of its electricity right now from coal, but they're switching to all electric vehicles in a matter of a few years. How do conservatives, Republicans, or the sane stop this from spreading nationwide?
Well, you're exactly right. That's what we got to do. John Barrasso is chairman of the Senate Energy Committee. He and I are fighting this every day, and we're going to continue to fight it. Look, California is following European energy policy, and look where it's getting them right now. When I talk to the White House, they never think about affordability or reliability when it comes to energy policy. And look, I think energy policy, environmental policy, we should always talk about those together, but we have to take into account affordability and reliability. Well, wind energy energy is probably 7 times more expensive to generate that same megawatt of electricity compared to natural gas. Solar energy is probably 77 times more expensive, and they're not reliable. 50% of the energy in Kansas is now coming from wind, but yet it's not reliable. We're being threatened with brownouts just like everybody else is. We can't count on the wind and the sun to blow, the wind to blow and the sun to shine when we need it. We don't have the battery storage. That's why we need to start pivoting to nuclear projects. That's something that Republicans are very focused on, are the new micro reactors, the modular reactors as well. So we see a great opportunity here, and America should be leading this.
We just spoke, Senator, to Verizon's chief revenue officer, who broke down how the majority of small businesses are worried about inflation. 69 million households are now canceling their vacations, driving less, cutting back on their grocery bills thanks to inflation. A new Gallup poll found that 56% of Americans say rising prices are causing financial hardship. It was up from 49% in January. Senator, the Republicans need to have a message on this. And I just look at some of the Democrat-led spending bills. Did you vote for the semiconductor bill, Senator?
I did not. Look, it's more wasteful spending. Only about $50 billion of that, of some 300 was spent on semiconductors, much like the infrastructure bill. Only about 10% of that was spent on infrastructure. This is why I'm going to probably be opposed to the continuing resolution going forward. But Dagan, to your point, I just did my 100th town hall a week ago Saturday. Our crowds were 4 to 5 times bigger than I've ever seen them, and they are mad as hell. They're mad about 87,000 IRS agents. They're mad about the price of gas, the price of groceries. They're mad about their families are not safe and secure. They're mad about the student loan forgiveness. And this is just the next chapter that they are struggling. I hear the screams. They're struggling day to day. We have to slow down the spending out of the White House. We have to roll back regulations. I think people are underestimating the regulation issue on this. We need to go back and look at quantitative easing and quantitative tightening as well. You all talked about the inflation and about the interest rates at the Feds, but we need to go back and see what the impact of quantitative tightening is right now, and how they used quantitative easing over the past decade to pad their own bank accounts.
And Senator, before we go, people are also upset that they have a commander-in-chief standing up there and vilifying half the country and ranting and raving about voters and their choices, but not angry about the criminals maiming, assaulting, robbing, and murdering people far and wide in this country. They're not upset. Biden is not upset and angry about, to our original point, all of the young people who've died from fentanyl poisonings. But they're mad. He is losing his marbles about voters who made their own choice, and vilifying them and castigating them and basically calling them children of Satan, but at the same time not upset about what criminals are doing.
Yeah, Megan, again, Kansans are just mad as hell right now. And the president has just lit a fire underneath my base, and they're going to get out and vote. That's how they're going to state their opinion. But what is a MAGA Republican? If that's a person that believes in patriotism, that loves their country, that believes in values like faith and family, that a community can solve its problem, that parents should determine their education, that we should reward hard work and innovation, then call me a MAGA Republican. But first and foremost, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, I'm a Kansan, I'm an American. I wish no ill will to other countries. I wish them the best. But not at the expense of my family, not at the expense of my country. Look, let's get the border secured. Let's get this economy turned around. That's what we should be focused on right now.
Senator Roger Marshall, great to see you always, sir. Thank you so much. We'll be right back.
Thank you.